Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate.
The courtroom was silent for a moment, and then it erupted. Gasps, shouts, even tears filled the room as the judge handed down a life sentence to Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old who assassinated Charlie Kirk in broad daylight. This wasn't just a trial about one man's crime. It was the final chapter in a case that has exposed the deep fractures in America's political landscape. And now, with this life sentence, the case has reached its legal end. But to understand why this sentencing hit so hard, we need to rewind back to the day America changed. September 10th, 2025 started like any other day on the campus of Utah Valley University. Students filled the halls, and anticipation was high because Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, was in town. Then, at exactly 12:23 p.m., everything changed. A single shot rang out, piercing through the noise of the crowd. Kirk was struck in the neck by a sniper's bullet and passed away instantly in front of thousands of witnesses. For the next 33 hours, the entire country held its breath. A manhunt stretched across Utah as local police, the FBI, and U.S. Marshals combed through leads. Students who had been at the event were interviewed. Surveillance cameras across the campus were reviewed frame by frame, and investigators worked against the clock. When the FBI released security footage of the suspected shooter, a man recognized the figure on screen. It was his own son, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson from Washington, Utah. Imagine the weight of that moment. A father watching the footage, realizing the young man responsible for the assassination of one of America's most well-known conservative voices was his child. Instead of covering it up or staying silent, Robinson's father picked up the phone and reached out to a family friend. That call set the arrest in motion. Within hours, Robinson was in custody. Authorities later revealed that Robinson had even confessed to family members before the arrest, removing any doubt about his involvement. The decision his father made not only handed investigators their suspect, but also likely prevented further violence. But once Robinson was in custody, the truth spilled out, and it was darker than anyone expected.
It was a total shock because that's not who Tyler was. That's not who Tyler is, and that's what shocks us all, is that if he did this, we think there was something else behind it.
Court documents and FBI reports showed this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. Robinson had planned the assassination with precision. Surveillance footage captured his every move that day, from arriving on campus at 8:29 a.m. in a gray Dodge Challenger to positioning himself hours before the shot was fired. Investigators pieced together his route, his timing, and even the spot where he dropped down from the rooftop after pulling the trigger. The most chilling evidence, however, wasn't the footage. It was what Robinson left behind in his ammunition. On the bullet casings, he had carved disturbing messages that revealed a twisted mix of political ideology and internet meme culture. One casing carried phrases tied to anti-fascist slogans, while another contained bizarre references to online gaming and furry subcultures. Some messages mocked the very idea of taking life seriously, showing just how warped his mindset had become. Robinson's roommate later confirmed to investigators that this wasn't random. He had spoken about needing to retrieve a rifle from a hidden drop location. These conversations showed premeditation weeks in advance. The FBI concluded that Robinson was radicalized online, blending political extremism with the kind of internet humor that trivializes violence.
Authorities say that Tyler Robinson made it clear to family members that he did not care for Charlie Kirk or his policies, which included comments that were critical of transgender people and trans rights. And this morning, we are learning from Utah Governor Spencer Cox that Robinson's roommate was in fact his boyfriend, who is a male transitioning to a female. The governor adding that the boyfriend has been cooperating with authorities and had no idea that Robinson was planning an attack that would end in Charlie Kirk's death.
The trial of Tyler Robinson quickly became one of the most closely watched courtroom dramas in years. Every detail of the case mattered, and the prosecution left no gaps in their presentation. They started with the physical evidence, the bullet casings that carried strange and disturbing carvings. Jurors were shown close-up photographs of phrases scratched into the metal, messages mixing anti-fascist slogans with internet meme culture. These weren't random markings. They showed intention, a mindset, and a motive. Next came the digital footprint. FBI analysts walked the jury through Robinson's online activity, chat logs with his roommate about retrieving a rifle, browsing history filled with extremist content, and private messages that revealed he had been planning the assassination for weeks. Then came the surveillance footage. Jurors saw Robinson arrive at the Utah Valley University campus in his gray Dodge Challenger, enter the area hours before the event, and position himself on the rooftop. The sequence ended with him fleeing after the fatal shot. It was a complete timeline of his movements that left little room for doubt. The most powerful piece of evidence may have been the confessions. Robinson's own father told the court how his son admitted to the shooting before being turned in. The family's testimony underscored the weight of the crime, not just a political assassination, but a son betraying the trust of his own loved ones. The prosecution used this to drive home the point that Robinson was not coerced, not mistaken. He was fully aware of what he had done. The defense had little to work with, but tried to shift the focus onto Robinson's age and state of mind. They argued that at just 22 years old, he lacked the maturity to grasp the gravity of his actions. They painted him as a young man who had spiraled into isolation, consumed by toxic corners of the internet. Mental instability, they suggested, played as much a role as political ideology. They urged the jury to see Robinson not only as a killer, but also as a product of a digital culture that preys on vulnerable young minds. For days, the courtroom listened to arguments and cross-examinations. When the case finally went to the jury, tension filled the room. Deliberations stretched late into the night. Reporters gathered outside, waiting for word of a verdict. Families of both Kirk and Robinson sat in silent anticipation. The weight of the decision was clear. This was more than a murder trial. It was a statement about political violence in America. And then came the moment no one in that courtroom will ever forget. The judge entered, the jury filed in, and silence fell. The foreman stood and read the decision. Guilty on all counts. Moments later, the judge delivered the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The reaction was overwhelming. Some in the courtroom let out sighs of relief. Others broke into tears. Cheers erupted from a corner where Kirk's supporters sat, while Robinson's family wept quietly. Gasps echoed as the reality of the punishment set in. The room felt split between triumph and tragedy. For Kirk's family, it was justice. For others, it was a chilling reminder of how political violence had reached a breaking point. When the sentence was handed down, the courtroom's attention quickly shifted to the one person who had carried the heaviest burden: Charlie Kirk's widow. Standing in front of the judge, the jury, and a nation watching through cameras, she made it clear that her husband's voice would not be silenced by a single bullet. She promised to continue his mission, to defend the values he stood for, and to ensure that his demise would become a rallying point rather than a breaking point.
The suspect has not been cooperating so far, and so we're getting all of this information from family members, again, people around the suspect, and then the forensic information that we have, which is confirming everything and more than what we were able to share in that initial press conference.
Her words echo beyond the courtroom, raising the biggest question of all: what does this mean for America? The assassination of Charlie Kirk wasn't just another act of violence. It showed how fragile political discourse has become, and how quickly disagreements can spiral into something deadly. For decades, people argued about politics in town halls, on television, and now online. But in this case, words turned into gunfire. The story of Tyler Robinson is especially troubling because he wasn't someone dismissed as uneducated or disconnected from society. He was bright, capable, and came from a stable home. Yet, He was drawn into a digital world where memes blurred into ideology and where violent rhetoric was disguised as humor. Piece by piece, his worldview hardened until murder seemed like a justified statement. It's a reminder that radicalization doesn't just happen in isolated camps or extremist cells. It happens on phones, laptops, and message boards that millions of people scroll through every day. The FBI underscored this point during the trial. Their agents testified that Robinson's path was not unique. They warned that political violence, once rare, is becoming more organized and more connected to online ecosystems that can radicalize young people at alarming speed. This assassination, they suggested, is not just an isolated act, but a glimpse of a growing trend. The fear is not only about who will be the next victim, but also about how many young men like Robinson are already walking a similar path. And that's why this life sentence is about more than one man. It's about the future of political discourse in America. Tyler Robinson will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but the scars of this case will linger far beyond the courtroom. It leaves behind questions about security, about freedom of speech, and about how society should deal with extremism before it reaches the point of violence. Do you think this sentencing will deter future political violence? Or is America heading toward even darker times? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates on this case.